Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I rise, Mr. Speaker, to make my contribution to this 2019 budget debate as presented by the Honorable Minister of Finance, Honorable Camila Gonzalez. Mr. Speaker, as I've been doing, and I continue to do tonight, all my presentations, public presentations, are captioned, giving thanks, Mr. Speaker, for the many years I've been able to be in the Parliament, and recognize that political service is not infinite, and that as we get older and wiser, we thank Thee for every day that the good Lord allows us to make representation on behalf of the people. Mr. Speaker, as I rise to make my contribution tonight, I start with a necessary controversy. I start with the controversy. And this is a controversy, Mr. Speaker, that I hold close to my heart, namely the ill-fated vote of no confidence that occurred in this House. Yes. And I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, looking straight in the eyes of the Honorable Prime Minister, until we mend that fence, there's no basis to do business with the ULP administration. More so, Mr. Speaker, I'm asking in this budget presentation for the government to commit to restore our constitutional rights and to reinforce the democracy that St. Vincent and the Grenadines is entitled to. Mr. Speaker, I say so softly, but I don't say so lightly, because I'll devote much time and energy to ensure that one day, and one day soon, this Honourable House does the right thing, and that you will have the strength, as you did have the conviction, Mr. Speaker, that you will allow that vote of no confidence to take place here. We cannot be the laughing stock of the Commonwealth. Yes. And we cannot be the soul in the Eastern Caribbean and the Caribbean community and the community of nations. I leave that on your chest to digest.
I want to be on the UN.
Mr. Speaker, I didn't exchange notes with the Honourable Leader of the Opposition. But I want to start with the renewal at 40 position of the Unity Labour Party. I think it's a good move, and I have no problems with it being highlighted. I simply want to ensure, Mr. Speaker, that in doing so, we do not subject ourselves to what I call revisionist history, because the year 1979 is a unique year, a special year in the annals of Vincentian history. Some of you, Minister Caesar, may be too young to understand when I say that what I mean. 1979 was the year of the Soufriere eruption. The year of the Soufriere eruption, you weren't born. And that's why I want to drive it home, big. As a matter of fact, coming out of that eruption, Professor Richie Robertson, who was a cadet officer at the time and who worked in that, went on to become a volcanologist, and his servant St. Vincent in that regard. That's was the beginning of his experience. He and I actually went on to train with Venezuela to get certificate in civil defense as a consequence of that experience. 79, Mr. Speaker, was the year when St. Vincent and the Grenadines came second in the Caribbean Football Union Cup in Suriname. It was a breakthrough. And I want to pause on that, because many of our outstanding sportsmen of that era are still around. And if anything else in this year, I want the Gailos, the Royalty, Barrow, goalkeeper Dorian Phillips, Paul O'Gara, and the whole shebang. I want them to be honored this year for that, what they brought to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. 79, Mr. Speaker, was also the union. No, there are youngsters that came much later. Union Island was the year, 79 was the year, also the year of the Union Island uprising, Bomber Charles. I remember as an officer then being at the grammar school on standby as bulldozers were repainted and camouflaged to do what I don't know up to today. But that's how far we'd gone to defend ourselves in that uprising. I remember that.
Standby to do so.
Well, it was the year I was a military man. It was also the year 79, Mr. Speaker, of this country's independence. You begin to get the impression why I say it's a historical and it's a strong year. It's the year when Skate sang our second anthem, A Nation is Born. A masterpiece up to today, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, 79, Ralph E. Gonzalez and myself were on the same political party. The UPM, United People's Movement. And I always remember our meeting in Diamond at what became Miss Horn's, who renamed the hall, I think, the square? HON Square. Trying to represent St. Vincent. In fact, I think the Honorable Speaker, Gonzalez, and myself are the only politicians here of that era. I still can see Joe Thomas, young activist running about in his sandals and black hands and coat because he's stenciling off the magazines of the time. Worked very hard right in that Paul's lot, that side. Hey? Sandals, what have I said? Cha-cha-cha, called it what you name. Mr. Speaker, it's also the year when my second son, Shay, was born. I have actually a nephew who's also called Guevara, my brother's son. But the name Shay and the Guevara are not coincidence, because I had the closeness then to good friends, which I still have to some extent in Cuba, all the way back to those times, Mr. Spirit. And 79, Mr. Speaker, was the start of significant working papers for the formation of the Coast Guard of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, of which I took a pivotal role. And in 81 had Commander Robin, as he became, Tibbles and Cambridge and others, leave the grammar school sixth form to join the Coast Guard service. So I say that, Mr. Speaker, because it's easy for some of you to speak about it, but I can stand there because I lived it. So, Speaker, as a matter of fact, I brought a commemorative coin for the cadet band that celebrated 50th anniversary. And I'm asking for something of a similar nature to be done for the footballers of that period. Because in 81, they returned in Puerto Rico to again place in the second in the map in football. Very well. And I'm proud, Mr. Speaker, to know that my football administration history carried on. I'm speeding up. Because when I left football, we were first in CONCACAF and 73 in the world. 180 something. After people like Julian, Minister Francis, paid the lottery and gave the money to Grantley Williams. All right, so leave that for another time. All right. I'll take advice. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker. I really am very happy to hear and witness the passionate embrace by Minister of Finance Gonzalez and Minister of Agriculture Caesar that we are at the point in the transformation is the word that was used most in this budget presentation. Transformative, transformation. It was used more than CBI. We'll come to CBI. But I want to acknowledge their passionate and warm embrace of an export-led strategy for St. Vincent and the Grenadines, which I have been championing in this House more than anyone else on behalf of the New Democratic Party for the last 17 and 18 years. And still believe that it is critical in the transformation that is necessary for a better St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Mr. Speaker, I'm also warned that the mantra on that side of the House is also now the mantra that we have been propagating on this side of the House of organic agriculture and the significance of value added. To that extent, Mr. Speaker, Senator James may have missed the boat in his narrowness of understanding of how bananas can feel into value-added activities and the potential for organic bananas and for value-added processes for the variety. I wouldn't take him there, but to acknowledge his limitation. That's enough for me. Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure I'll have enough time to reinforce my arguments, but I say to them on export-led agriculture, organic agriculture. No, welcome, welcome, welcome. You on board? You on board? I've been here for a long time. Mr. Speaker, we must of necessity go back to the pillars of the appropriation bill, namely the financial summary, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, with respect to the financial summary, I want to make passing but important observation. When I received the first copy of this document called the budget estimates, I think it was of Wednesday of last week, Mr. Speaker, the first thing that struck me is that we had a debt of over $250 million and an other receipts section of $236 million. And I said, wow. Wow in the vein that Minister Mackey has said once in this House. Lo and behold, Mr. Speaker, within 3 days, the $250 million debt had been reduced to just over $200 million, and the other receipts had dropped from 236 to 196. I am to be persuaded that that was a spreadsheet error. It was no fault of the public servants, and that, in fact, all would be well. Well, I'm not persuaded. Absolutely not persuaded. But I move on, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to draw this honorable House to, well, before I get there, because it wasn't just that the debt ran out of the window and the other receipts account dropped by $38 million. We also had this accompanying sheet in which we said, please refer to the changes attached for inclusion in the draft estimates of revenue and expenditure. Part 1, financial summary. Part 2, functional classification. Part 3, summary of total expenditure. Part 4, summary of recurrent expenditure. 5, summary of recurrent expenditure. 6, 7, summary of capital expenditure. Summary of capital expenditure. Ministry of Finance Planning. Ministry of Finance Planning. Disposed outstanding debt. Grants and where they could have write over the whole budget. Because this is simply too many errors for a budget that's a month late and is in the hands of the public servants. I don't want to go at them, but I have enough experience on record in this little country of ours, of which several of our public officers have been allowing themselves to be compromised, to become gatekeepers in doing the bidding of the administration. And I say that without accusation. If in fact they were genuine errors, well then they owe me an apology, not me them.
Amen.
That's my position on that matter. Well, they apologized to you, the Finance Committee. I'm glad I wasn't there for the apology, because I said the same thing to them. It's not good enough. In fact, we had 3-4 years ago where in the budget we had $112 million left out of the budget until the IMF came here to point that out. It's unacceptable. This is shoddy work. Shoddy work. Mr. Speaker, let's go forward and go past this monumental error and observe the following. Our form of presentation of the budget, Mr. Speaker, our form of presentation is not used in St. Lucia, nor is it used in Antigua, nor is it used in Grenada. None of those countries. In fact, I have copies, Mr. Speaker. I'll ask the House to photocopy them so they become copies of the House. And I draw attention to the comparative and alternative presentation format because it is more informative and provides better financial and accounting picture, snapshot picture of precisely where the country is at a given time. It is true, Mr. Speaker, in the way we present our financial and executive summaries. If you went to page 727 of the budget, you would find some of this data. But right here on the front of these estimates, you can get a primary surplus, you can get a current surplus, and most important of all, Mr. Speaker, in the case of the presentation of Dominica, which I like very much, you have a very clear picture of what is the finance requirements of the country. And I want to spend some time there, Mr. Speaker, because if I look at the financial summary presentation of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, I consider all is well. We're going to spend over $1 billion. We're going to receive X dollars in recurrent, Y dollars on current expenditure, various capital expenditure, and we live happily ever after. In fact, it is that naivety that allows some of the colleagues to run with this impression that some of these projects is going to happen. Well, my MP comments have been reminding us all through the night that there's a real possibility that several projects just not going to happen. Anywhere you see the word local, run from it.
Get it.
It means the money is not there to provide. But, Mr. Speaker, and I'm going to give the Minister of Finance this alternative format, you know. I'm using the Antigua format, so I present the St. Vincent and the Grenadines recurrent development estimates. I have to speed through this. I'm sorry members will not be able to retain the figures, but I'm doing it for a reason. Estimated recurrent revenue, $655 million, and you can take out your budget and read it with me. Estimated recurrent expenditures, $844. Less debt service amortization gives you a total estimated recurrent expenditure of $638 million. From that arithmetic, the estimated surplus or deficit is $24 million. You then go to your estimated capital receipts, which we have as $410 million, and an estimated capital expenditure of $222 million. St. Vincent, when you go for the estimated surplus, when you do the arithmetic, on year's operation capital, you end up with a figure of $188 million. And you look at the estimated surplus deficit of the year's operation overall, and this is assuming that we don't have the $198 million special figures. It shows you that St. Vincent and the Grenadines, sorry, this is with that figure in. It shows that we will end up with $6,641,000. So no financing is required. If we accept all the data that you provide, we'll end up with $6,614,575. You can send your budget director to look for these and let us sit. And then you can challenge me. Don't do it tonight. You don't have that with you. If the same information is presented, Mr. Speaker, and we take out the 198 other receipts, the finance requirement for St. Vincent and the Grenadines to make this budget possible will be $215 million, $788,551. Do I speak about this? Not because I project myself, because I have an accounting background, a background in finance, and a good understanding economics. But this, in essence, is what is the gap that we need to fill. To make all the things that we have been talking about here possible tonight, another $221 million. I haven't heard anybody suggest.
Over 20%.
You gave me the impression you could wave a magic wand, and we live happily ever after. The truth be told, when we have gone home at the end of the week, it's nightmares for the Minister of Finance, and equal nightmares for the former Minister of Finance, because we simply don't have the money, and we are not indicating strong enough that this money is not present. So, Speaker, that puts paid to the lie that we are doing well, when in fact we are cash in hell, to the tune of over $200 million. This is the credibility gap, Mr. Speaker, that the Director of Audit has so strongly spoken to time and time again since 2007. And I have repeated it over and over. but it appears that stick breaking the ears of some members of this honorable House. Mr. Speaker, the Emperor has no clothes. If we look at pages 21 and 22 of the 2000, well, I can read it, for some people who are hearing for the first time, This is the Directive Audit Report of 2007. And what it said then, over the last 6 years, the actual alternative capital revenue has shown that financing for capital works was not always forthcoming. This meant that adequate funds were not raised to finance and execute a number of projects, including the capital budget for the financial years. And it advised you the government should consider reviewing the total estimate for capital expenditure, since these large shortfalls in capital revenue have implications for credibility and capital budget. That is your man speaking. In your own St. Vincent de Grenadines Economic and Social Review, page 12, capital expenditure, it says spending in the Public Sector Investment Program, PSIP, for the period January to December 2017 amounted to $69.4 million, or 11.2% lower than the $78.2 million spent for the same period in 2016. Capital expenditure is affected by the continued slow implementation of the PSIP during the period in question. Mr. Speaker, it ain't done there. You go to the 2011, I spoke about 2007, the 2011 audit report, actual capital revenue. During the financial year, a total of $172 million was recorded as receipts, falling short of estimated revenue of $281 million. Wow. 172, but you say you were supposed to get 181. The comparison of actual output for revenue for financial years 2010 and so on and so forth is 41% decline, nearly half of what it should have had. But listen to the authority. When you turn to page 22, and they gave you table 2, the accounts of a capital revenue. Loan revenue, they give you the figure. Grant, they give you the figure. Local loans, they give you a figure. External loans, they give you a figure. What's the figure for the receipts? 0. Damn lie, Mr. Speaker. Apologies, Mr. Speaker, for the damn lies. Untruth.
Total.
Mr. Speaker, I want to draw this House's attention to a report that has been referenced in this House, the Moody report. Moody, for those people who don't know, Investor Service, is that international agency best known for coming into countries after the IMF or alongside the IMF to look at their books, do the evaluation, and come to a conclusion as to the veracity of your statements. On page 7 of the report, this is what they said about St. Vincent. And I had the occasion to sit with them with MP Niger Nature, the other side of Major. And you'll tell you I made the same point to them. Data transparency remains a major institutional bottleneck in St. Vincent. Let me repeat that. Data transparency, meaning things are opaque, is a major institutional bottleneck. And I read in its entirety. Significant data limitations constrain St. Vincent's institutional strength, despite the country's relatively high governance scores. Data deficiencies are a constraint in analyzing the fiscal situation in St. Vincent, with public sector debt reporting subject to lags and government finance statistics coverage that is generally worse than in similarly rated sovereigns. In other words, what they get in St. Vincent and the Grenadines is worse than other countries at the comparative level of financial provisions. They didn't stay there, Mr. Speaker. Substantial shortcomings also exist in terms of coverage, consistency, timeliness, and quality of macroeconomic data. Balance of payments data, a critical area in terms of St. Vincent and the Grenadines vulnerabilities, are compiled only annually by the ECCB, and a quarterly data are not available. Annual data for the international investment position are also not available. So what Moody says about us, if I was a Minister of Finance, I'll feel bad, because it doesn't speak well for the public service efficacy. And maybe you shouldn't. because after you have so disparaged the public servants and morale is so low, you're getting what you pay for. But I didn't say that. I just did. That's why, Mr. Speaker, and I repeat myself, in the capital programs, there's so much listing of local as source of funds, essentially meaning that these projects will not happen. Meanwhile, Mr. Speaker, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle parade across the stage in the band Mirage to the sweet music of Skinny Fabulous. Family, le. Always family. Yes. Don't criticize. Mr. Speaker, I pivot now to some significant economic matters. I've heard the Prime Minister before, once, twice, 3, 4 times, and maybe 5 times too many, speak only St. Vincent and the Grenadines and Trinidad and Tobago have not gone to the IMF for budget support or things to that effect. And all. Since 2008, I give you the final words. Bad choice, Mr. Prime Minister. As my parents, my grandmother of 97 years old, resting tonight downstairs, she might be listening to the radio in her studio. St. Vincent, Grenada, and Trinidad and Tobago are not sex and size in financial terms. Sex and size. Don't compare us. We have a GDP, or gross domestic product, $0.8 million. That of Trinidad and Tobago is $22.1 billion, 28 times that of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And for you guys who figure that the CBI is such this terrible thing, Barbados is as bad as it's doing, you know. It's $4.79 billion, 6 times our GDP. St. Lucia, with CBI, twice ours. Antigua, twice ours. Grenada, almost 1.5 times ours. And little St. Kitts, with half our population, has a $945.9 million GDP. Bigger than us, with half its population size. And whereas we are looking at $11,000, whereas we are, thank you, Prime Minister, $11,000 in St. Vincent as our per capita income. In St. Kitts, it is $17,000 US for their per capita. You think they did that on the strength of their own? Go back 84 when they were drowning in debt, 126-1 with a GDP ratio. Today, they are the only country in the Caribbean that has achieved the 60% debt to GDP ratio, well ahead of 2030. Driven largely by these institutions, by investment programs. We're back away from that, you know. Not 1 square inch. And had we done it 10 years ago and been in government, we would have earned to them nearly $5 billion. Correct. So all those people who have lost the arm, the foot, the toe, all kind of problems in the hospital. I know you would answer me, and I look forward to your answer. But I ain't done with you yet. I thank you. I look forward. I'll be here bright and early. Brush my teeth, steam my skin, and get here. Mr. Speaker, powder my chest. I could always defend my family, you know. You know, there's a lot of chest beating and thumping and pontification. I mean, I'm sitting here tonight, the indignity of me listening to Senator Carlos telling me about monocrops. What makes you be able to talk to me? Because you have been a journalist for so long standing? Or that you are a lawyer? And that I drop asleep when Lloyd Best was teaching me? It can't be right. Leave him alone. Come on. But don't talk about farming. Because on your side of the house, you have the most qualified farmer and experienced farmer looking after housing,
By its own admission.
With a $500,000 capital program. And a lawyer, as the Minister of Agriculture, talk about a vote of confidence. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I want to go back to page 6 of the Moody report, because on the comparison with Trinidad and Tobago, it is even deeper than I've thus far explained, Mr. Speaker. The fact of the matter is that St. Vincent and the Grenadines is not a standalone sovereign country. No. You know why it's not? It is not because we are a member of a currency union. We are not in charge of our monetary policies. And had we been standalone, as you would like to feel, in the context of our declining balance of payments, we would have long since gone to the IMF. Because our tourism would not have been able to provide the foreign exchange required to keep us afloat. I know you're going to come back. Mr. Speaker, let me tell you what the Moody's report reminds us. The Eastern Caribbean Currency Union, however, implies that St. Vincent has no... Colleagues, St. Vincent and the Grenadines has no independent monetary policy and cannot adjust the exchange rate to mitigate external shocks.
That's a good thing.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing. Or we're bankrupt already. Exchange rate inflexibility places a greater emphasis on export competitiveness, which I started tonight speaking about, both in goods and services. But, Mr. Speaker, let's go to page 22. Let's go to page 22 of the social, was it? Page 22. Sorry. Yes, of the report. Yes, Economic and Financial Development Report. On the merchandise trade, this is what it has to say, you know. St. Vincent and the Grenadines' performance in the international trade area was mixed during the first 3 quarters of 2018.
Where are you reading from?
Preliminary data shows...
Where are you reading from?
The economic and social data. Preliminary data shows that... Give me a hearing, Mr. President. I would listen to you tomorrow in silence. Preliminary data shows that merchandise trade declined slightly by 0.7%. to $780 million, and the deficit in the balance of trade worsened by 53.8, that's around $54 million, or 10% to $604.9 million. In other words, we're in a lot of trouble still. We don't earn enough foreign exchange, Mr. Speaker. We don't earn enough foreign exchange. That's all right. We're dealing with the invisible trade. So I'll talk about the invisible trade now, tourism.
Okay, right.
So let me go to the Moody thing, because this is serious business, you know. So people have a grasp and understanding.
I remember you have 15 minutes.
15 minutes is enough, Mr. Speaker, because I have one paper to come. I have to come to the CBI.
Can I give it some of my time?
I said,
And I'll take some of your time.
I did say 1 to 15.
15. 1-5 is
Oh, I
good,
thought he
Mr.
said
Speaker.
50.
I don't ever overstay my welcome. Mr. Speaker, let's go to the invisible trade.
The Honorable Finance Minister is willing to give you time.
I thank him very much. We need to understand, Mr. Speaker, that in this country that is highly dependent on the invisible trade, tourism. Tourism contributes 48%, half of our total exports receipts in 2017. St. Vincent and the Grenadines, therefore, St. Vincent and the Grenadines' favorable growth prospects, they should support economic activity in St. Vincent. The economy also relies heavily on contributions. So, well, I missed something I wanted to say. Because it's also 22% of total employment. That's how much we depend. 1/5 of our employment is dependent on tourism.
They make an error about the...
I know they had to be wrong.
No, not that. No, not that. They make an error as to the extent of the contribution of
remittances. So don't read it.
No, you can't read it.
Well, so I'm reading the error on the remittances side. And I believe you're right.
You notice how I know it?
I believe you're right, and I'll tell you why you're right.
Yes.
Because when you're wrong, I'll tell you you're wrong.
You know,
But you're right. But your right is not going to make it right, unfortunately.
you notice how I mean,
Remittances. That is our dependence on the people in the diaspora amounts to 25% of GDP. Well, it's an error because our GDP is 2.18 or 169, and if you do 25%, you're looking at about nearly $500 million, $400 million. And the contributions of the diaspora is a little closer to 300 maybe. 125 million by 2.5, whom did that give us? Yeah, ain't far off. In other words, it's significant. If it's not 25%, it's probably about 17, 18. It's not half. Not half. But the truth of the matter, as we all know, without the diaspora, we can't have Christmas.
That's right.
That's the basic point.
That's right.
The second biggest economy after tourism is the diaspora. Put that in a pipe and smoke it. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I've heard so much bantering for the night. Me not sell passport, CBI, CPI, and you would feel that the sky is falling in on the New Democratic Party. And that we're in the worst company. They say that in England, that say that over there. I mean, at one time, the Europeans are the colonial masters, another time they're bullying us, and when they convene to hold on and hug up at them. Yeah. It's like you're going to the Privy Council now to appeal against the teachers. Why would you do that? Why do you do that to yourself? You had to be joking. Like you say, yes, my friend, I had to look up. Don't do that. Don't embarrass yourself. And you know, you don't spend over $500 million on petitions, and the case is still going. And I don't believe the figure right for the spending. I believe it's done past. I don't believe the $647 million right now, you know. I believe you're holding back some. Anyhow, time longer than 20, and I run out of time. ECCB, the East Caribbean Central Bank, has a working paper. And I want to go to the working paper.
Our central bank.
Our central bank. Without us, we're nothing. And in one of the research papers, Mr. Speaker, this is what it's titled, you know. The central bank considers it so important. This is Sovereign Wealth Funds, SWF, abbreviated from here on. A model for citizenship by investment programs in the ECCU. You hear what I'm saying? They're saying that the CBI has a close relationship to SWF, Sovereign Wealth Funds. And we can look at the lessons and the benefits of Sovereign Wealth Funds to see how we can apply it in best practice to help this in the Caribbean situation. So, follow the money. Follow the money. I'm not going to quote extensively from this document, Mr. Speaker, which I'll have to make a copy of the House, Mr. Speaker. Don't worry, we'll call Governor Antoine tonight and humbug him with the work, you know. Because I know you. I know you. I say I know you.
You're making a break with leadership there.
Yeah. Leadership.
Listen to me.
No, let me let you throw me off. Let me let you throw me off. Throw me off. Let me let you throw me off. All right, good. Subsequent to an increase in corporate sector investments over the last decade, sovereign wealth funds have been a popular subject in the debate on international investments. Sovereign wealth funds are state-owned instruments, funds developed with the purpose of investing surpluses or excess reserves. Dr. Friday alluded to it, but didn't develop it in his presentation. The Honorable. These investments therefore yield substantial returns when the government may utilize for various purposes, including imminent liability. Recently, there has been much discussion on the issue of economic citizenship programs or citizenship by investment programs that have been undertaken by a few of the countries within the ECCU. Currently, there are programs in Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, Grenada, and St. Kitts Nevis. And the speaker about the government of St. Lucia instituted a committee to examine it, but they have moved on before that, because this is 2016. Additionally, they said these investment programs constitute a significant proportion of non-tax revenue in 3 of the ECCU countries. Now remember, the EC dollar is back to 100%, you know. And if we didn't have their backing, we didn't have the amount to back up what we're talking about in here tonight. Well, I know you don't go on and you leave that alone. Though these funds are being kept largely for infrastructural development, other nations and international institutions have cautioned against the prevalence of CBIs. So they acknowledge that. Again, the same set of people the Prime Minister talks about who bullies us. So let me read. The discussions, however, have moved beyond the structure of these funds to the management use. St. Kitts and Nevis created the Sugar Industry Diversification Foundation, Antigua and Barbuda the National Development Fund, Dominica a Consolidated Fund, and Grenada a National Transformation Fund, each with its own structure. And they said St. Lucia will begin its own investment program in January 2016 and has legislated for investment for the St. Lucia National Economic Fund. Now, when you understand that Antigua and St. Lucia is 40% of our economies, you know, and they see wisdom in that, they still run it in 2019. The big question for us policymakers, Mr. Speaker, is what must we do in St. Vincent and the Grenadines when all around us the evidence abounds that there's benefits to be had from the program. I'm not even going to refer to Trinidad's experience with the sovereign wealth funds and so forth and the lessons to be drawn. I want to fast forward because I want to come back to my constituency a little bit. They make the point here, Mr. Speaker, and this is important. This is important. They say, alternatively, sovereign wealth funds, like CBIs, may aid in intertemporal obligations. May aid in intertemporal problems. Obligations such as pension reserve funds and economic development funds. We have both of those problems here. Whoa. We have the pension reserve problem in St. Vincent, and we have the economic development fund in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Well, they have it in the other islands, they say these corporations typically seize large proportion of equity and other investments, and contingent pension fund reserves provide for contingent unspecified pension liabilities on the government's balance sheet. Right? Who is saying? I'm reading from a working paper from East Caribbean Central Bank, and I've deliberately chosen not to give you the names of the authors tonight, so that people could go to sleep. Well, I'm glad. Well, you have the name, so why asking me? Well, if you have the name, read out the name. Mr. Speaker, how much time I have?
Half an hour. You have 5 minutes. Well, honorable parliamentary representative for Central Kingstown, if you're reading so extensively from a document,
yes,
I would think that you owe it to the House to tell us where you're reading from.
I started by saying that, Mr. Speaker.
Excuse me?
I said that up front, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, but you were saying that you were afraid that someone would call somebody a name and so on.
Mr. Speaker, if I may, and I really don't want to break the flow of the honourable member, because I'm enjoying his presentation, but he said the ECCB has this paper, and this ECCB is bringing this working paper, and he doesn't want anybody to call Mr. Antoine and so on. The paper is authored by Beverly Lebadi, Chanel Thompson in the research department. But on the very first page of the paper it says, disclaimer, the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank strongly supports academic freedom and a researcher's right to publish and encourages such activity among its employees. However, the ECCB as an institution does not endorse the viewpoint of an employee's publication or guarantees technical correctness. The views and opinions expressed in this paper are solely those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect those of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. I don't want to challenge the point, but he's saying that it's an ECCB document. So I just want to clarify that it is the opinion of 2 members of the research department of the ECCB. That does not necessarily say it shouldn't be discussed, but I'm just saying for the sake of clarity, we should make sure that it is 2 authors.
You're not going to use legalese to muddy my water and mislead the list.
Please continue, Honourable Parliamentary Representative for Central Kingston. Please continue.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, says, you know they have a way they call you sometimes.
Honourable Member, please continue.
Don't let me go there tonight. Just don't make a mess of my discussion. They say, Mr. Speaker, presumably, in short, Mr. Speaker, what I want to make the point is that the working paper by senior economists, you know, we have to make provision, Mr. Speaker, we have to make provision in here for dotishism. I withdraw, Mr. Speaker.
Very well.
I withdraw the expression.
I think you're allowing yourself to be thrown.
Yes, I withdraw the expression.
Yeah, but I think you're allowing yourself to be thrown off. You have 5 more minutes. I would ask you to use that 5 minutes wisely.
And the 5 minutes wisely, Mr. Speaker, is to make the simple point that 2 of the respected economists who are at the central bank presenting a working... Could you be quiet? Could you be quiet? I have already withdrawn the expression of dotishism with respect to you. I don't want to make the same mistake twice.
Please.
It's burning them, you know. The
Please.
economists at the bank, Mr. Speaker, I'll speed read the Central Kingston because they know who I am, makes the point that the experiences of sovereign wealth funds, which bear similarity to CBI programs, must be more closely studied, Mr. Speaker, because we can make tax deductions from these surpluses, not only to assist in balance of payments for budget support programs, but also to assist in pension fund programs in the Union. In fact, there's a very specific mention. One, you see, that is your problem. You start a presentation to the calling ganja a cash crop. You know ganja can't go into the United States of America. You're looking for all kind of backdoors to sell it through Canada and ease it across to America. To put us into the same correspondent bank, all the rest that we're talking. You wanted to do it for the international banks. You wanted it for a range of other things. But for the CBI that can transform St. Vincent, you have another standard. No Sankey, no saying so. The New Democratic Party is standing firm. And I am prepared to be judged by the people on this program. Because you see, when you speak about poverty, it's not when the guys on the blocks and sharps speak about poverty. You understand? Who eats it feels it. I know what's like to be in a shop and see people live by a candle light at night, a tea bag per night, a juicy for breakfast, asking to sell a bag of bread of 5 to buy 3 out of it for $2. So that's the other side of what you talk about. Yeah. Mr. Speaker, I just want to make some constituency proposals, Mr. Speaker, because I'm not just simply here. Because to the extent, and I'm wrapping up, Mr. Speaker, in 2 minutes, I'm going to speak to it. To the extent that we believe that the CBI can provide the fuel to satisfy the credibility gap, the $200+ million deficit to make this budget swing, we again restate our call in the New Democratic Party for a constituency development fund. We believe a fund of something, we take half of what Dominica makes now. Dominica puts $404 million in for budget support. Even if we got 200 of that, we're in business. And I'm feeling, Mr. Speaker, we could apply something like $6 million per constituency or $90 million per year to transform our constituencies. And in that regard, Mr. Speaker, we could do all the things that they're talking about here. This naked and unabashedly disgraceful copying and paste of the successful NDP program of the Mitchell regime and company, which they called Goody Chats, no, naming it PAVE. PAVE my neck. That's an NDP program where we did big things for the small man. So don't rename it and rebrand it belatedly. Mr. Speaker, I am going to speak on a program, and I'm going to speak to Minister Caesar in Agriculture, which I'm titled Project Help, HELP. Household Employment Leverage Program, Mr. Speaker. And it's my intention, Mr. Speaker, if you had finished your education, you wouldn't make an ass of yourself, so you know. Camilo.
Honorable member, please. You can't.
I withdraw the ask, Mr. Speaker. I wouldn't even wait on you, Mr. Speaker. I withdraw the whole statement.
Come on.
I withdraw it, Mr. Speaker. Mr.
Please.
Speaker, spoil it. I'm also suggesting, Mr. Speaker, that we look seriously at a $50 million investment. Can I be heard in silence, Mr. Speaker?
Honorable member, listen, this is Parliament, you know. This is Parliament.
Thank you.
And
a $50 million agribusiness processing business, Mr. Speaker.
this is Parliament.
For processing all of our soft foods.
You didn't expect an easy ride.
No, I good, Mr. Speaker.
Very well.
But you notice I hit as hard as I get, Mr. Speaker. As hard as I get.
Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, you know, I brought to this House a question of idle hands for idle hands. Well, I see somebody suggesting that they were there before me. I know I brought this to the House as a question. I'm so glad to hear the Minister of National Mobilization, whose presentation I very much respected, beginning to take state lands and put at disposal of our unemployed young men and women so that they could be productively occupied and can help themselves. Amen. Mr. Speaker, I have spoken in this Parliament before by what I call VAREP, Vincentian Association of Retired and Elderly Persons. I see there's a place for it, and the government were there before me with their home care program for the elderly. A wonderful program. It has my support, but we can do more in that regard. I think the Prime Minister had committed to that before, using the NIS as a state agency to see how best we can take care of our elderly in the retirement years. Minister Brown, I listened to you on your polyclinic in Maricoa, and where on the leeward side again? Bookman. And I repeat my call for the polyclinic in Redemption Shafts. I'm asking you, clasp my hands, and I'm begging, please, please, please. Central Kingston is the only constituency without a dedicated health facility. We need to have a polyclinic in Redemption Shafts. When I listen to the Minister of Sports speak about lighted courts and hard courts and the improvements, I went for 3 months without being able to get the Green Hill field cut. I called the manager and begged him. He said all equipment break down. I said, you want to go and see? He said, no, I can't come. I'm going to be embarrassed. You can't even cut a playing field. You're talking about lighting playing field. You know, sometimes, why should I? Why should I listen to you? Why should I listen to you? The New Democratic Party will support the program, and we are making the call for lighted fields and hard courts across the country for obvious reasons. I make the call again, along with my colleague Senator Bacchus Matisse, for that Fenton Road to link Daphne, Belair, and Green Hill.
Honourable member, you have to wrap it up.
Mr. Speaker, and finally, I want or appreciate being consulted, being involved with the Kingston Cleanup Program, so that it is more than a politicking. I mean, I have seen so many things happen in Kingston for which I'm the representative. And you're a Heritage Square man. All sorts of morning activities.
I'm a Vincentian man.
I know that. On the wider level, a Vincentian man. But you're a cultural person as well. I don't know, you have the courtesy to tell us they have an event. I want to see the cleanup taking place on the waterfront. I want to see the boardwalks coming into being. I want to see the sidewalks being attended to. I want to see the drains. I brought to this house before already. Those toilets wrong the street near the business place in Tokyo. They were in there since I was a child at 8, 9 years old in the market. You're going to sit down and you could actually see where people bottom cut out the mark and the seat them. Wear and tear. People go and dig the thing, man. Come on. Come on. We can do better than that. Mr. Speaker, I'm glad that the good Lord has given me the time and opportunity to be here for my people. CBI or no CBI, I'll be there.